Today's episode of the Ryen Russillo Show on the Ringer Podcast Network is brought to you by State Farm. Just like basketball, the game of life is unpredictable. Talk to a State Farm agent and get a teammate who can help you navigate the unexpected. Kind of like the Bulls winning against the T-Wolves. Maybe that isn't unexpected. Maybe that's to be expected. I don't know. The T-Wolves thing is, every time I check in on them, I'm like, hey, what's going on, T-Wolves? What are you guys up to? You lost again. Okay, cool. And Towns went absolutely crazy. Wiggins had an unbelievable second half, and it doesn't seem to matter. And then Covington, apparently, who everybody wants. Some of these trade rumors early on, the best way to read the trade rumor isn't, man, I hope my team can get that guy. The best way to read it is, who would we possibly send that would get us that? Like Bogdanovich at Sacramento, half of you fan bases are like, yeah, we'll just take him off your hands. He's good. He's good. He's actually a good player. And just because his contract is up doesn't mean he should just be given away. So there you go. Get a teammate who can help you navigate the unexpected. Talk to a State Farm agent today. Kyle, what is good, my man?
I'm just trying to be ready for Sundance, drinking lots of water.
You're going to Sundance. When are you leaving?
To Sundance. You got a script there or something? You going to?
I screw up the Sundance trip. I think I'm on year 4 or 5 of screwing it up. I always say I'm going to go. Like, it's always a year out where I'm like, oh, that's this week. I'm like, okay, next year I am going. And then, at least with ESPN, I would always arguably be too busy. Although Hartford to Salt Lake is possible, believe it or not. No, it is. It is. Okay. Don't laugh. That's a lot of people from Salt Lake are like, you know, if I'm at East Coast base, I'm going to do it in Hartford, because why wouldn't you? And then when I moved out here, so last year would have been the first time I was on the West Coast for Sundance. I was like, oh, that's right now. But I'm going to Atlanta for a couple days. And that was kind of like a post ESPN, just be in the mix for a couple days and then get out of there. And then I went to Nashville for a couple days. So that was kind of cool. But this year it was absolutely locked in. I'm definitely going to Sundance. And then I was up at the Ringer Studios on Tuesday, hanging out with Bill, hanging out with a few other guys. And they were like, okay, so what's the Sundance plan? I was like, oh, that's this week? I go, I keep thinking it's the week after Super Bowl. They go,
it's like 2 weeks, isn't it?
No, it starts up
forever.
No, it starts up now. But by the time I'd get back from Miami and then watch the game and then have to do a pod, like it's over. Like it's not cool to be there anymore, I guess. And so this is my 1 year reminder that in 2021, look out Sundance Festival. Because I'm going.
You going to Miami for a week, dude? What do you mean?
No, I'm not going to Miami for a week. God, no. Miami's, but again, this is always that kind of thing where it's like, oh, Miami's changed so much. Miami is definitely different from the first time. The first time I did a Super Bowl there 10 years ago, so that was the Saints-Colts one where Breeze won. That was one of the few trips where I was gone for 9 days, and I was like, I'd still be good staying here. I'm having so much fun.
Damn.
And it was just fun. It was relaxing. It was good. You know, a couple nights out, a lot of mellow nights, and we were doing the show from the beach every single day. And that was kind of like, wow, this is great. It was also really funny too, because we had a moment where there was this TV producer that was like, hey, do you guys mind doing some of these kind of skit type things at the start of, that's when it was still the SVP show. So I was like, yeah, no problem. Like, let's just do some skits. And Scott was like, what are we doing? And then the TV producer brought over like these cheerleaders, and the cheerleaders were going to like shake pom-poms around us, and we were going to like walk through them and high five them. And Scott, look, I wasn't exactly saying, this is sick. Let's definitely do this. Can I go first? But Scott, whatever my apprehension level is with some of this stuff that's kind of like a little cheesy, his is like full-blown panic attack. Okay. And he would tell you this. So I'm not telling anybody here. He just, and it's kind of funny because he had the juice. He just go, nope, not doing this. No, this is a no, not. And then it's like all these hot cheerleaders are just standing there looking at us.
Did you end up doing it?
No, no. Like Scott was like, not doing this. No, done. And then it's just like me standing there. And then the girls are looking at like, what's wrong with these guys? Like just smile and walk through a group of cheerleaders. But I do think that like guy that gets his picture taken with Miller Lite girl, or I should say Coors Light girl, or, Belvedere hostess for the night. I think the guy that like gets that picture taken is like, I'm killing it. Like I don't know.
How is that possible? Whenever, how is that possible to feel that way?
What do you mean?
To feel that way? I don't know.
Oh, no, dudes feel it. Like There's a few guys that I've worked with. This is a while ago, but like would have an avatar of them with
nice,
like Jaeger promo girls, and I would just be like, well, you're not. It is like cool. You're in a picture with somebody who's attractive that probably never talked to you after the Jaeger promo night.
Totally paid to be there.
Yeah, like that's what, like, I don't know. Like part of me, maybe I should envy the guy that thinks he had an amazing night that goes
just
to his buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's probably a crew right now listening to me like, what's wrong with getting a couple snapshots with the Jaeger girls? And I'd be like, nothing. I just remember when I used to work and then manage a bar, those promo nights, it was such a disaster. Like a total, because whoever was going to work for Goldschlager in the mid 90s and start pushing Goldschlager at like dive bars in college towns, like that person was really young. And if you weren't really young, damn, like, I'm sorry. And then they'd show up with a few shirts and everybody would murder each other for the shirts. And then the promo people always got drunker than anybody else did. So,
they're having the best time. They're heroes.
Yeah, that was kind of their thing. Like, I just go out all the time. But you're like, how many times can you do an ice luge of Goldschlager in a week?
Well, if you're in a college town, it's like giving out money. It's like you're the Monopoly man or something.
Yeah, but I'd imagine like whoever was, Aftershock was another big one. Like everybody's trying to figure out some weird cold served shot that could be like the next thing.
Aftershock. I'm Googling it right now.
Yeah, Aftershock was like a dual threat. That was like the dual scent Axe body spray of liqueurs.
Oh, liqueur. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Red liqueur. Jesus.
Wait a minute. Do you see it right now?
Yeah, I see red, hot and cool cinnamon.
Yeah. So for anybody that's, talking about Fireball, this stuff's all cyclical. Like, I mean, it just is. But those promos were always hilarious because you never really kind of knew what you were going to get. Like sometimes people are a little bit more buttoned up, like definitely with like the beer distributors. And then there would be maybe like a promo girl, and then she would have girls that she hired, and they may have been like completely off the grid. They may not even gone to school with you. Like you didn't even know what, and then like one of those was always a complete disaster. And you was just like, and then you're running the place. And despite, being really young running one of these bars, like when I worked, I was working and I would just be like, this is brutal. Anyway, there you go. So yeah, I'll send out, I should do that for Instagram though. This week in Miami, I should try to get my picture taken with like the cheesiest thing, be like killing it down in Miami, dude.
Oh, please. You'll have plenty of opportunities too.
I will. Yeah, it's a good call. Good call, Kyle. Okay, today's podcast is sponsored by ADT Commercial for Business. ADT Commercial serves businesses ranging from mid-sized organizations to large-scale enterprises. Think of them as a special team who has one focus, your business security. They provide a comprehensive line of security, fire, life, safety, and risk management solutions. Professional-grade systems for commercial-grade businesses. With ADT Commercial, every day is game day. Fortune 1000 companies rely on ADT Commercial for highly complex, scalable, integrated solutions that help solve their unique business challenges. And if you're looking for a partner to upgrade or take over the monitoring and service of your current system, ADT Commercial can help to painlessly install and maintain large-scale multi-site businesses. They make it easy to switch providers. Their onboarding is predictable, dependable, and painless. Schedule a no-obligation security review with ADT Commercial for Business. No pain. That's good in sports and good in business security. Visit ADT.com/game day to learn more. That's ADT.com/game day. Here's the plan. We got Royce Young from New Orleans. But before we do that, actually, let's get to him first, and then I'm going to probably go off at the end. I don't know. I don't know what kind of mood I'm going to be in on this one. So I have this week's open, but I'm closing with it. So there you go. ESPN NBA writer Royce Young. Is there a senior in there, Royce? Because I know how I would hate to leave that out. There's a senior writer.
You were appropriate in leaving that out. I'm not senior.
Okay. What does that actually mean?
I have no idea.
Because I know it's a big deal when you get to say you're a senior writer, because I've seen like young people get it. And it's like, man, they already made that guy senior writer. So,
well, senior writer. Wow. Oh, yeah.
Right. Despite being friends with, I assume, a lot of senior writers, I imagine it's just more money and it sounds cool, but I don't think I've ever asked anybody the question. So there we go.
I think it's probably like getting, when you're like not actually a doctor, but you get to say you've got your doctorate. So now you start calling yourself doctor, doctor, whatever. I assume it's the same thing. You just introduce yourself that way all the time.
Actually, I think it's more real than the doctor thing. I think when anybody has an honorary degree, Like everybody is in on the same thing on the honorary degree. Just, hey, it's cool. We like what you've done with your life. Here's an honorary degree. But then you start hanging them up. Not that hanging them up is wrong, but then actually saying like, oh, I have a degree from Tufts. You're like, well, you don't. They honored you one day because you did some stuff. Okay, I'm sure this is what everybody wanted to hear. You were in the building.
Let's keep going.
In New Orleans, one of my favorite cities. And I know, pretty well kind of how this is all played out in the lead up to all this thing. So what was it like being in the city and then being in the arena and seeing it for real, getting Zion started here?
Yeah, I mean, it was an awesome experience. First of all, just the game itself, start there, and it was kind of I don't know what the word is, Ryan, to use just for the first 3 quarters, the first 12 minutes of Zion's career. Choppy, awkward, reactionary, however you want to describe it. But for that 3 minutes, that I've been to a lot of great regular season games. Having covered the NBA in Oklahoma City, you happen to see a lot of dramatic events happen. That's a top 10. I mean, that 3-minute flurry was just sensational. And like almost in the same way of like how everyone had to wait 3 months to see Zion, having to wait those 3 quarters for him to finally arrive in the NBA, so to speak, was kind of worth the wait. So, being around the city though, we spent about 48 hours kind of going around, getting the feel, seeing what people were thinking. And I think that kind of the vibe that I get, and I hope I'm not completely wrong on the impression I got from people in New Orleans, but there is kind of this, come talk to me when he's done something vibe. There's a lot of hype and there's a lot of anticipation about what he might represent. But I think that people around here also recognize they had a guy that was super hyped before. And while Zion does feel differently, and a lot of people say that he's connecting himself with the community in a way that Anthony Davis never really did or never really could. The way that Zion, his charm, his charisma, showing up on the sidelines of high school football games, all these things matter a lot to people around here. He already kind of feels like one of them. But at the same point, he's got to produce a winning team. And I think that's how a lot of people kind of feel, is that talk to me when he's doing something. And because, last night's game wasn't even sold out. There was a lot of empty seats in the upper deck. So I think that's kind of how people are looking at this.
They could be, fresh off a national title. That could be part of it. But
true. Very hungover city here.
Yeah, that also could be, maybe an anti-Anthony Davis thing. But before we get to kind of maybe more of that, and then the exit and Gentry and everybody's explanation after the fact, because that became, a big part of last night's story. The lead up to it has been all over the place. Like, I know that, I don't know, maybe over a month ago, I tweeted out, I don't know what to believe about Zion for this year anymore because I'm hearing all sorts of things and I'm actually willing to believe anything. Like, I had heard that agents always want to do this. Agents are like, look, the less risk is you not playing. So why don't we do this redshirt year that we're seeing in the NBA a little bit more often and just sit it out and then we'll see what happens. Griff, the GM, said that was never the case. And look, he played. So I guess it wasn't. And let's not forget Zion, where we do a really bad job of this, where we ignore what the actual person we're all debating about wants. And when Zion came back and played after he got hurt at Duke, and people were like, don't play. Again, I think a lot of that's motivated by so many people in the media that hate the NCAA. But it was a Zion like looking at us going, no, I want to play UNC again, like win an ACC title, maybe win a national championship. Like, I actually like doing this stuff. So while I'm here, I might as well come back and play. And people are like, I can't believe he would do this. So it's clear that he is motivated to want to come back and play. But the thing that I think is most, and I don't want to say concerning, because look, he took his shirt off, he got out there, and I'll admit too, I'm like, oh my God, he looks terrible. This buildup of how much he's been working out and the body fat percentage numbers, like all the stuff that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, it feels like, honestly, a lot of that was just bullshit. And I don't expect him to be in NBA basketball game shape. Van Gundy made a great point. It is that point. I don't care how great your cardio is. I don't care what you're doing working out. Until you run around with 9 other NBA guys for 40 minutes, 35 minutes, there's nothing to simulate that, because your body's moving in all these unpredictable ways and the intensity of the whole thing. And at the beginning, I'm like, well, so much for all this workout stuff and all these updates, because it doesn't look like any of that has impacted him whatsoever.
Yeah, it honestly, like that first 4-minute burst, Ryan, I felt like in the first 2 minutes he looked gassed. Like it looked like he was a little bit tired. And I think that it's just natural that when your adrenaline gets pumping the way that I'm sure his was, your heart rate's up. You kind of just can't control that. And you cannot simulate what it's like to not only be in an NBA game, but to be in a game this hyped, this anticipated, the crowd revved up the way it was. You just can't simulate that. You can't be prepared for that. Doesn't matter how many wind sprints you run in an empty gym. It's just not possible. So, I do think though that when it came to him kind of settling into the game, he obviously took kind of a different approach. He was a little bit passive. The Spurs, Greg Popovich almost, the unintentional troll that he is, was doubling him on every catch, kind of forcing Zion to kick the ball out. And, I think Zion, to his credit, kind of said, I'm not going to overly force this. I kind of wondered if his first play would be just him bulldozing his way to the basket and getting an offensive foul, but he kind of just tried to pick his spots. But I will say this, Ryan, we're all freaking out about the 4 threes and how awesome a moment of that was. And while he was out, he probably worked on his shot to an incredible degree. But if we're all getting revved up about Zion and saying, see, I told you so, based on the fact that he hit 4 threes, I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit, because that's not going to be what makes him a great, great player, at least in the early going. He's got a lot more to offer in other areas. And the shooting is just like the icing on the cake. Like the shooting, if he can get the shooting going, now we're talking about an elite player in the NBA. So while he made those 4 threes, I don't think that you can be, I don't think anybody should be completely blowing the roof off saying, I told you so about Zion just because he made 4 threes. Because whether or not the ball goes in the basket, I think is unimportant here. I think there's other areas of the game where Zion's going to be an elite player.
Yeah, that's not who he is as a shooter. That's not the way the shot looks. I mean, it's still flat as hell. And, give it to San Antonio, which they'd always be forgotten they actually won this game. It was 30.
Right.
His numbers from 3 at Duke were better than you'd think they were. The funny thing is that the other perimeter guys shot it worse than he did. Like RJ fell apart, and I don't think Reddish's numbers were very good from 3, but he was 34%
You just want people to think you might
3.
take one, right? Isn't that what it's mostly about? Is just that you could take one and could make one. And as long as you've got that thought in a defense's head, then I think you're where you need to be.
Yeah, that's really all it is. I mean, that's the part about Giannis that I like, in that it's something you at least have to think about. And in this league now, you really, the more guys that you have to think about and spacing all this stuff out, especially as a center, which is, I'll never forget. And this happens, man. I mean, you don't play and you're sitting on a desk with a bunch of guys that played, and you say something and then it's immediately dismissed because you're the guy that never played. And I know it's happened to me a bunch. And, there are times you get really frustrated. And Mike Schmitz, who does our draft stuff, and he went on Get Up and said, look, he's a center right now. And the ex-players laughed him off the set. And he's playing center last night when they had that run.
Yeah.
And so if he's a stretch 5, and I don't want to hear about Favors and Hayes and all those, like none of that stuff matters, okay? It doesn't mean anything. If those guys are not there to be in his way, that team is for Gentry to figure out the best way to use Zion. And I think it's right now, at least at center. And if he's a guy that at least makes you think that you have to keep him honest there on that shot, then that's a huge plus. And I don't even know if he's going to be that guy, because I don't like necessarily the way it looks, but the special ones figure it out. So we'll see.
Yeah. And, a good example again is Milwaukee and Giannis, and him playing alongside Brook Lopez changes every single dynamic of the way that the Bucks play and the way Giannis can play. Is that when you have a big stretched out to 28, 32 feet or whatever, that makes a big difference in how you can use this guy that is so dominant 15 feet and under. So, I think that the Pelicans, if you just look at their personnel, they don't have anything that could resemble Brook Lopez. Obviously, they've got guys that score the ball 5 feet and down. So, I think that to your point, Ryan, it's exactly that, is that the Pelicans are going to kind of have to reshuffle and figure out what the pairing in the front court along Zion needs to look like. And while I think having the hyper athletic guys like Jackson Hayes gives you an interesting angle when it comes to defensive matchups and switchability and some of those things, if Zion's not going to be a consistent 3-point shooter, which I don't think you can rely on that being the case, if he's just a capable one, that's more than you could ask for. But if he's not going to be a guy that's truly a threat, you're going to need somebody, I think, at the 5 that can space. Otherwise, like you said, you're going to have to basically play him as a 5. And look, whether or not he's 6'5", 6'6", however, whatever the height you really think he is. Like, the dude is built like something just out of a comic book. So he can play center for all I care because he may not be so tall, but he's as wide as a player that you can see. And he can carve out plenty of space, and he can jump over basically any 7-footer. So I think he's more than capable. And plus, he's just a matchup nightmare. If you put a big, slow center on him, that's a huge problem. And if the Spurs would have played Zion straight up one-on-one, I mean, who did they have that could guard the guy? I mean, is Jakob Poeltl going to be slowing down Zion's first
That was
step
the matchup.
So,
at one point, it was Jakob Poeltl, and you're like, okay, well, let's go. And
yeah, that's why Jakob Poeltl sagged off like 25 feet from him. He was like, I know that I can't stick with this guy.
No, and the big thing about Zion, too, and scouts will say this, and you know this, Royce, is that I remember like the first time somebody goes, look at somebody's second jump. You know, like the guys that really separate themselves from, like, everybody's, you know, a certain level of athlete, right? There's a slower athlete. Like Paul Pierce was, he's not as athletic as Vince Carter. But like, no, Pierce was like a different kind of athlete, you know? Steph Curry isn't Russell Westbrook, but Steph has body control and muscle memory in a way that's just as athletic as anybody else, but it's not flashy. You know, it's not Zach LaVine. Where Zion has this thing where his second jump, like he had a miss on the left side of the rim when you right to left on your TV during that third quarter stretch, and he missed it. But he, as a great second jumper, you always have the advantage of the guy with the ball in your hand. If you know you missed it before anybody else does, and he just jumped through everybody, caught it on the other side, and then put it back up. And you just go,
yeah, that was an awesome play.
Like, what was that? And that's one of those, you know, look for guys that are either, oh yeah, he's big, he can move around pretty well, but what's his second jump look like? And Zion is absolutely the poster boy for that. He gets yanked, and I know I was upset, and you could say it's selfish, but this is really something bigger that I'm going to get to here on this podcast, and just that, yeah, we wanted to see him back out there. Yes, I understand all of the concerns leading up to it. I'm amazed at how, in a very short amount of time, I would say in just a few years, it feels like most of the media is like, no, it's cool. Like this fun thing that everybody's enjoying, stop it immediately for the sake of minutes restrictions and projecting what could or couldn't happen. Gentry said it was the medical people. They tried to sub him out like 3 times, and he kept making all those shots. How did you see that playing out, and then the explanation afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was uncomfortable. And I thought that Gentry, he did his best. And I mean, you know Alvin Gentry, Ryan, and you can do all you want to try to keep him to stick to script. And at a certain point, he's going to go off of it. And he in the post game, he tried to stick with it. He expressed that he was disappointed, which I think he needed to do, because look, Zion was very disappointed. And being around him in the locker room, I kind of hung around the locker room as he was getting ready to go for his post game press conference. And there was people kind of coming up and almost, I don't want to say consoling him, but kind of telling him it's okay, because I think that he was frustrated with the way that he had it rolling. Everybody was fired up. It was the dream come true. His NBA debut couldn't be going better for him. He flipped the tide of the game. I mean, not only did he make 4 threes in a row, but the fourth one gave him the lead. I mean, they had come back from a double-digit deficit. So, and then he sits down, and so I think he was pretty frustrated by that, and everybody kind of had to console him. So I think Gentry recognized that, and he was trying to kind of play both sides of it. But when he went so far to say, I don't think Sean Payton would have sat down Drew Brees, it was like, okay, now we're making weird comparisons, and that doesn't make any sense. But I will say this, in some ways, Ryan, I almost feel like it could be better, just as like from a narrative perspective, from an entertainment perspective, that Zion did go sit down, because now, like, what was going to happen next? He was going to heat check at some point, right? And he was maybe going to miss the next 2 out of his 3 shots. I don't know. Maybe it would have been spectacular. He just would have kept making them. But more than likely, he would have missed a couple shots down the stretch, and it would have, you know, the hot hand would have disappeared. The momentum would have kind of been popped, and it wouldn't have been the same thing. But now it's like the cliffhanger episode. It's like the thing of he left the building scorching hot, and it's like, now what? Now what's going to happen with Zion? So now that next 4-minute burst that he has Friday against the Nuggets, it's like, wow, can he pick up right where he left off? So I do think, from like, if we're looking long view entertainment, this could be kind of a good thing. It's like the cliffhanger. I'm eager to see the next one more so than I even was.
I did not expect the entertainment zag. Wow, that was good. I'm not even saying like I agree with you. It's just, you're right. Like, there's this thing where he hits those shots, and then it's like, okay, that's it. Like, we're just only going to give you a taste. You can't play another song. And that's
right.
it. Do you have any other good anecdotes from just being around it? Stories, something that you're going to remember, something you're going to tell other people when they're like, hey, you were there that night?
One little thing that happened last night that I thought was just look, Zion Williamson is as charming and likable, and I've only been around him just a little bit, but holy cow! Like if you don't want to just like hug that guy everywhere you see him, I mean he is so likable, and really the authenticity just jumps off of him, and just the way that he kind of embraces his own immaturity, I think is really, really charming. And so, but when one of the things, Ryan, is that post game, they kind of have a podium set up because it's such a big deal. And it just so happened, Zion's never really done a true NBA post game press conference. And so he's coming down the hall, and it just so happens that he ends up going at the same time Drew Holiday does. The Pelicans were planning to bring 4 players to the podium. And when the door opens, Drew kind of like looks over at Zion and kind of like that scolding veteran way says like, they don't care about what I have to say, man. Like, why are we here together? And Zion clearly like misjudging the timing of showing up at the same time as Drew Holiday. He's thinking, I'm just going with my teammate. He's like, my fault. And so like, you could tell Zion felt really weird about it. And there was a couple times where Drew Holiday would either get asked a question or answer a question, and Zion was like shaking his head with a big grin on his face, like, okay, good. I didn't completely mess this up. At least Drew's getting his time too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, honestly, he's probably just doing it. But if you're Drew and you've been around as long as you've been in the league, you're like, I don't feel like sitting up here watching your press.
They're not in this room for me. I get that. Yeah.
What was the dumbest question anybody asked Zion?
Ooh, dumbest question. I mean, it actually ended up being a good answer, I think, from Zion, but I did kind of find it weird. It's like, was your NBA debut everything you dreamed it would be? And it's like, it was kind of a cringy question to me because it's like, well, they lost. Like, you're basically saying, did you always dream about losing in your NBA debut? But Zion, as he tends to do, answered it in a pretty classy and smart way. And he acknowledged, like, other than the losing, it went about as I could have hoped it was. The energy was awesome, but I did cringe a little bit when that question came out.
What do you think is going to happen with how Brandon Ingram adapts to this? Because he has been incredible for them.
Yeah.
He's been a big moment guy too. Like, it's not, I've started to feel, and this is actually something Simmons and I talk about all the time. I think we're in this era right now of the NBA of some of the emptiest big stat games that I've ever seen. And I'm trying not to be in the moment with it, but like I'll look at some of the numbers of these players that we all think are really good. And I'm like, yeah, they keep losing all the time. And I'm not telling you the Pelicans are good, but when I watch Ingram's games that are kind of big games, I'm like, this guy has more impact than just the raw scoring numbers, and he's a borderline all-star. But now you go, okay, how do you make this work? Like having better players, this is better for Ingram than having worse players around and putting up big numbers. But I do think it's something to think about because so much of the offense ran through him.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Ryan. And then just also, this is something any team with young, talented guys are going to have to battle against. It's just kind of the tug of war that goes on when it comes to the spotlight too. And like, let's not forget, Brandon Ingram was number 2 pick himself. He went to Duke too. And he was kind of a big deal coming into the NBA. And now he's playing at an all-star level. And I couldn't help but find it a little bit uncomfortable when Brandon Ingram's at the free throw line with 2 big free throws with 4:30 left in the game or whatever. And the crowd's chanting, "We want Zion," as their possible all-star standing there with 2 big free throws. And what does Ingram do? He misses free throws. So like, I can't help but like want to pay attention to that a little bit. And look, I think from the Zion perspective, again, he is so likable, and I think that he is so accommodating to his teammates that there's not going to be any friction caused in that regard. But at a certain point, everybody wants everything. I mean, that's, these players, right? And they want it all. Every single one of them wants it all. They want the shoe deals. They want the commercials. They want to be the all-stars. They want everything, and they should, because that's their expectations for their own careers. But I do wonder how that could go as kind of, you need 2 stars, you need 3 stars, but you also need them to be able to be cohesive and together. And that's going to be on the Pelicans front office and the kind of the culture that they're developing, which I think they're doing a really great job of, by the way. But I do think that they've got to kind of massage this situation and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And as everybody's developing and growing, that there's no tension that kind of builds up on the inside.
Great stuff. You can follow him at Royce Young, ESPN NBA writer. And thanks for the time. Enjoy the rest of your time in New Orleans.
Will do, Ryan. Thanks, man.
Okay, before I get to this week's Open, which is the close, the matchup is set. And both teams are ready, preparing for the biggest game of the year. Time is almost up on the football season, but you still have time to feed your fantasy fix with DraftKings, the leader in one-day fantasy football. Plus, for a limited time, all new and existing users can get a deposit bonus up to $500. We keep telling you guys about this. It's $500 free if you play the game. Draft your lineup and feel the sweat like never before. Every run, throw, and catch mean more with a DraftKings lineup on the line. It's simple. Just draft your lineup, stay under the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition. DraftKings will have millions of dollars up for grabs for the big game, so you won't want to miss out. Don't want to wait till next week to get some action? DraftKings also offers basketball contests every day with hundreds of thousands of dollars up for grabs. So if you're sitting around, hey, I'm bored, I have nothing going on, DraftKings, play a little hoops, daily fantasy, done and done. Download the DraftKings app now. Use the code Russillo, Russillo, during signup. For a limited time, both new and existing users can get a deposit bonus up to $500 on your next deposit. That's code Russillo. And you can get a deposit bonus, like we said, up to $500 only at DraftKings. Minimum $5 deposit required. Deposit bonus requires a 25-time playthrough. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. Hey, want to just remind everybody about ZipRecruiter because we know how challenging it is to hire people. You're listening right now. You know, it's true, though. Anybody that runs any kind of business and will say, hey, how's it going with that guy? I'd be like, you know what? It's so hard to find good people. Right, Kyle?
True that.
Like when you start your own company, you know you're using ZipRecruiter. You're probably going to have a promo for it because of all these ads. Feel free to jump. Don't jump in then. Okay, here's what we're going to do, Kyle. ZipRecruiter is going to send your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Ryen Show. That's RYEN Show. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Ryen Show. RYEN Show. ZipRecruiter.com/Ryen Show. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. This week's open is this week's close, and it's about Zion Williamson. I, like many of you, planned my day around Zion's debut, and it's something we've all been waiting for a really long time. Simmons and I talked about ratings decline. I think there's a million different reasons. Also, shout out to some of you that chimed in saying, hey, some of the ways you can share NBA video now on these streams, these illegal streams, like that has to play into it. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer, but shout out for another reason why, because I think we're about 10 to 15 deep on potential reasons. And one of those reasons was Zion Williamson. And despite the debut anticipation, which may have only been surpassed by LeBron's first game. And I remember what that was all about and watching the game and be like, man, he's going to be awesome. The shot looks a little loose. Order the jersey immediately. Like I was all in on the LeBron thing just because, not that that was rare, but it was because it was fun. It was going to be different. It was going to be exciting. And he was going to develop into this guy that's arguably one of the greatest players ever. And whenever anybody actually exceeds the hype leading up to it, it is so rare. Tiger did it. LeBron did it. A-Rod probably did it. And I don't know if Zion's going to do any of those things because he's in a different category because we're starting with concerns not about his game, but about his health, his body, and all of these things. Whenever I do a draft report, the first thing I do when I write them all out, and I write them out for myself, is I look at somebody's body. And too often I'm probably like long, athletic. And just because guys are skinny and 6'7", sometimes we'll all be like, hey, he's athletic. And then it's not always the case. But with LeBron, it was his body is perfect. With Zion, I went from liking him with questions to loving him with still the same questions. I would write on my notes, bad ass, not meaning he's tough, meaning his ass looks huge. And that's just the reality that you're dealing with when you're talking about players and what their body is going to look at, especially young guys early on. Like I remember Drew Gooden out of Kansas. I thought he was going to be a completely different player, but he got thick in the hips. He had a really nice career, rebounded, scored, but was a different guy than he was at Kansas. And it was because of how his body changed. And some guys that are big get smaller. Duncan prolonged his career by being a big, thick guy that actually got skinnier, and it helped him stay healthy. I mean, when you really think about Duncan's career, there was a time where you go, 10 years ago, we were worried if this guy was going to be done because of his legs and his feet, and now he's out here winning championships again. So when you look at Zion, that's the first thing. And then when you factor in all the rumors that he wasn't even going to play this year because his agents didn't want him to play and that David Griffin pushed back on all that, that's not happening. Then ultimately Zion being like, hey, I actually want to get out there and play. So it was great when news came out after a report that he had to learn how to run again, which never sounds good. Like, hey, what are you up to? Oh, I'm 19, I'm 20, but I'm learning how to walk in a different way. I'm learning how to run in a different way. That actually seems impossible to me unless you're like a straight line sprinter tweaking every little form or piece of form that you have. So with Zion, it was, what's this going to look like? So he gets out there and he starts, and I got to be honest with you, and I think a lot of people would agree, the first thing I thought of was he looks terrible. He looks fat. He looks like his legs actually are hurting. And the adrenaline part that Royce Young talked about earlier is absolutely true. Like, think about the anticipation of being a kid and then making your NBA debut, especially with this delay, and just to be hyperventilating on the inside. So it was not surprising to see him gassed immediately, but I didn't know if he was gassed from just the excitement or that he isn't in shape. I don't know what these stories were about him working out, and Van Gundy was funny on the broadcast where it was like, wait a minute, he gained 9 pounds of muscle in 1 week. That's not real. Now, I think most people that work out, and I'm not even putting myself in this group because I'm not educated enough on it, but like real trainers will tell you that if you're big and you're strong and you're this untapped potential, you know, this rough piece of clay, and you start working out the right way with somebody who knows what they're doing, you can put on a good amount of muscle in a very short amount of time if you've never, ever done it before. 9 pounds in a week seems a little aggressive. 8% body fat seems absurdly inaccurate. And so then it became, is this guy fat openly on the broadcast, which then, of course, turned into body shaming. And if you can just put down your copy of this month's Atlantic and join us in the real fucking world and how we talk about athletes and talk about sports, as I said at the top, we talk about your body. We talk about who's in shape, who's out of shape. We talk and speculate, is this guy hurt? Is this guy right? That is the gig. That's what all the money is for. We talk about you in a way that we wouldn't normally do it. At HR, you know, you wouldn't show up to Fidelity today and say, hey, so-and-so is probably the fattest guy in the office. You want to know why? Because we don't care about your body type when you're putting together an IRA, but we do care about your body type when you're a pro athlete. And heaven forbid the guy that gets canceled for ever suggesting any female athlete is out of shape because you'd be toast. You'd be telling people, hey, I'm into real estate now because I said something about a woman looking out of shape that was a pro athlete. But for the rest of us in the real world that talk about, let's just say, men, that's part of it, okay? That is part of it. So let's not turn this into a fat shaming thing just because guys were questioning what he looked like. But it did get ugly at the beginning, and then Mark Jackson dropped the I always like Ja Morant better line, which was incredible. I mean, a minute's record for Mark Jackson to already be saying, well, Ja Morant was always my guy. Ja Morant is terrific. I love Ja Morant. You guys know I love Ja Morant. But what this job is, the GM job for an NBA team, is the toughest GM job in all of sports. And I've said this all the time. If you don't have one of those guys, you really don't have a chance. And the reason why teams will miss on draft picks can be because they're stupid. It can be because they don't put in the work. It can be because a college coach tricks them into taking their guy and it's built on some relationship. There are a bunch of different reasons why somebody can miss on a pick. But another reason teams miss on picks is because they have to swing for the fences to hope to get one of those guys. So as much as you may have thought Ja Morant was the next greatest thing, and he might be that, to think of what Zion could be is the reason why you still take Zion number one, despite all these concerns about his body and all these different things. So he comes out after 3 minutes. The back and forth isn't great. He looks apprehensive. We know he's a good passer, so that's part of it. But it just looked like a guy that was like, all right, I'm just kind of trying to get my feet wet and fit in here and see how this goes. And I'm already pre-bummed out like a 40-year-old on a Thursday getting ready to go to Vegas for the weekend, thinking about that Sunday where I'm going tomorrow morning after this Zion game is going to be all about whether or not this guy is a real deal. And I love him. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be special. I think he's going to destroy people. I don't want to hear that he's going to be doing this against men now because they're not strong enough to deal with him, okay? They aren't. He's already stronger than most of these guys. But it was going to turn into a contest, as it does in my business, of who can be the most specific and dumping on somebody the quickest or anointing somebody the greatest the quickest, right? And I was just thinking about it going, okay, none of this really matters. You know, the people that would say that stuff is the kind of people that you don't really respect in the business anyway. So who really cares? Why are you going to get upset about these things? And then boom, 17 points in 3 minutes and 8 seconds. He hits 4 threes. I cannot believe he hit that 4-3. Because when you hesitate and you think as a shooter and you go, oh, all right, wait a minute, let me rethink this. Hell, I'll just shoot it. That never goes in. And for Zion, it went on in his fourth shot. He's not going to hit threes like that. But all of a sudden, the entire game changed where it's New Orleans is down. And by the way, that's a game they kind of wanted, right? They're trying to make the playoffs after not making the playoffs for a long time. We can talk about the value of a draft pick versus the value of getting your brains beat in the first round of the playoffs, which is probably what's going to happen to whoever is the 8th seed in the West. But there are franchises that go, we haven't done this in a long time. So, and look, the Pelicans actually were. It's not like they've had this massive, massive drought here. Davis was in the playoffs prior to last year's disaster. But this is a franchise that probably wants some short-term wins here with everything that's gone on. So he scores 17 points in 3:08. They take him out. They looked like they were trying to take him out a few different times, and they were. And I'm at home, and I'm outraged. And I'm not even so mad that they pulled Zion, even though that's the origin of it all. I was probably more mad, as you guys know me well enough, I was more mad that other people were so accepting of it. And this has happened in a very short amount of time. It kind of falls into the category of all the people that hate the NCAA so much that they're just mad that Travis Etienne even want to go back, when it's like, hey, by the way, don't you guys always want the player to be able to do what he wants to do? And if Travis Etienne wants to go back to Clemson because, I don't know, he just fucking likes it there, isn't that okay for him to do? And that's exactly what he's doing. So get out of his way. Isn't it okay if Zion wants to come back and play at Duke last year because, I don't know, he just wants to play at Duke, right? Like, hey, I could sit out or I could come back and play for a championship. Hell, if Kyrie can come back, anybody can come back, right? So in this quest to support every player, but then disagree with them if they do something you don't like them doing, it's also this massive protection of the player, and that anytime someone is rested, it is only the right decision. And that's where I push back on this. I am not a climate change doubter here, okay? Spare me your okay boomer reactions. But there are simply too many people that think every time somebody is pulled from something, it's always the right thing to do. And I don't think last night it was the right thing to do. I don't know that the Pelicans would have won. I don't know that Zion, like maybe he would have gotten tired, but here's what you don't know. Him coming out of that game off a positive isn't going to change the path of his career versus him missing a couple more shots. Him being gassed at the end doesn't mean that all of a sudden he was going to blow out an ACL. Like you don't know that. And yes, I'm sure the science, and I've gone through it and be like, all right, more exhaustion leads to this and all these different things. But I've also seen people argue, and it happened when Durant went down with the Warriors, not in the playoffs, but before that against the Wizards, where it was about a minute into the game and somebody fell into his leg, pushed his leg back. He thought he was out for the year. He was able to come back. But in the moment, one guy who I like was like, yeah, you know what, though? He goes, the way his schedule worked out, he looked a little late in his reaction. You're like, are you kidding me? Somebody fell on his leg. And that's what I find myself pushing back on. It's not that Zion left the game. It's that everybody thinks it's the right call. And I shouldn't say everybody, but large portions of the basketball media think it's always the right call. When my point would be, whatever information you've read, you think you're right, but you're guessing. And so are the same people that put a minutes restriction on it. It can be fancier technology. It can be wearable devices. It can be all sorts of monitoring. It can be all these guys thinking it out and going, this is the plan. This is the plan. And you know what it is? It's a really smart guess. It's a smarter sounding guess than just, hey, let's wing it. And that's the problem with some of the stuff that we have in sports. And this isn't a generational thing. Let's take a look at no-hitters, because it's become this thing where it's like, oh, you left the guy out there with 90 pitches? That was stupid. Okay. Now, granted, we have more no-hitter opportunities because the game of baseball has changed around so much that, like, look, I had called this years ago where I go, I just don't think Jake Arrieta's, I just don't think he's Bob Gibson. You know, I don't think he's Sandy Koufax. I think there's some things happening with the approach of hitters that is changing some of these numbers, where we have these bursts of years from pitchers who are pretty good, but then they're being put in these all-time categories because of their stats. But one thing that has happened is that there is more of an opportunity for no-hitters, but no-hitters are apparently stupid now. From 1995, going over the next 16 seasons, you had 8 seasons where only one pitcher was pulled from a no-hitter. So an entire full season of baseball, 8 of those 16 seasons from 1995 on, you had a full year where only one guy got pulled during a no-hitter. Now it happens all the time. From 2014 to now, it's about 30 different times a pitcher has been pulled from a no-hitter. Does that mean everybody's smarter, or does it just mean it's less fun? And now some of the times the guys are getting pulled, some of the pitchers, it was really crazy going through it, like major league debut, first time up. Okay, never thrown over 60 pitches. He's at 80. Some of them are understandable. But there's this acceptance of it now that just is, is mind-boggling to me. Steven Strasburg, we can go over that. Remember in 2012, they wanted to keep him to like 160 innings. And I remember going through every one of his game logs saying, if you really wanted to do this and make him available for the playoffs, there's a way you could have staggered this out more. And they didn't. They shut him down in the playoffs. They didn't win. And why did they do it? So that Strasburg wouldn't get hurt again. And then guess what happened? Even though he did a pretty good job in jumping up the innings the following 2 years, he had a bunch of seasons where he never cracked 150 innings. And I'm sure one of you is going to say, who cares, dude? They just won the World Series. Yes, 7 years later. Klay Thompson having 60 points after 29 minutes and 3/4. I don't care if you're killing the Pacers. Go for 90. Let's see if somebody can surpass Kobe's 81. I know I'm not the biggest Harden fan, but when Harden has a matchup and Russ is out, I want to see him take 50 shots. I want to see how many points he can get because that stuff is still fun. And watching Zion go off last night was fun, and I wanted to keep watching it. I don't think it makes me selfish. I don't think it makes it sound like I'm putting his health in jeopardy. But what I'm telling you is that I don't think it would have been the end of the world, and that's a guess. But if you're telling me it was, you're guessing too. All right, that'll do it for me. I'll be with Long on Chris Long and I are emptying out the trunk on Monday. He doesn't want to do any football, so I'm putting together all sorts of stuff. I need to do an email for the show. I really do. Maybe I'll just do a show email for Gmail, and I really should get that going so we can have people write into the show.
I can handle that for you. It's simple.
All right. Can you just do the Ryen Russillo show at Gmail?
Sure thing, man.
Or the Russillo show at Gmail, or you can do Russillo Ringer at Gmail. Just whatever it is, and then I'll tweet out the thing and be like, hit us up with mailbag questions for Chris and I on Monday, and then a couple different things playing in Miami. So that'll do it. Please subscribe, rate and review. Can't thank you guys enough, and enjoy the weekend, all right?